Welcome to the Inside Out Money Podcast.
Can't even recognize this place. Too many pieces of our past mistakes.
Hi, I'm Maggie, and I believe real change starts from the inside out. So let's work together to improve our money and our lives from the inside out. We will explore all things money and our relationship with it. Join me each week with a rotating set of co-hosts, friends, and interviews. Let's jump in.
It's time, we going round and round and round and round and round.
Hi, everyone, and welcome to Inside Out Money. This is a personal finance podcast focused on redefining wealth from the inside out. Each week, I speak with a rotating set of co-hosts about a different financial topic to help you improve your financial mindset and tactics. And this week, we don't have a co-host on. We have an interview with Rebecca Sandidge. Hi, Rebecca.
Hi, Maggie.
Thank you so much for joining us.
I'm excited to be here with you.
So Rebecca is here with us today, and we are going to talk about all things paying for college, paying and prepping for college.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm really excited for this discussion because selfishly, I've got 3 kids that are getting eerily close to college age. Somehow it snuck up on me. And this is a fascinating topic that has a lot of kind of myths out there and things that people don't properly understand. And Rebecca's going to help us learn more about how this all works. And so let me give a quick intro of who Rebecca is so that you know why we're talking to Rebecca. So Rebecca is actually Dr. Rebecca Sandidge. She is the Vice President for Enrollment Management at Oglethorpe University, which is a private liberal arts university in Atlanta, Georgia, where we both live. Dr. Sandidge has had a lot of success working at both public and private universities across several different areas, including student affairs, residence life, intercultural affairs, business school admission, and central administration. She earned her master's from Ohio State University and her PhD from the University of Georgia. So Rebecca's super qualified on this topic. You literally live and work and breathe in this on the college side, which I think is most fascinating. And for full context, Rebecca and I first met, I was going to say on the volleyball field, not the field, on the volleyball court because our kids played volleyball together.
Yes.
And you spend a lot of time in a gym, like 12 hours some days, hanging out with other parents. And I immediately loved Rebecca. And one day we got talking about college and I was like, oh my gosh, you are a wealth of information and a bunch of things that I never knew.
Yeah, that was a great conversation. And I'm excited to continue it off the court and in more comfortable chairs than what we sit on the volleyball court.
With windows.
With windows.
Yes, I agree. We're going to talk about a bunch of things today with Rebecca, but I want you to start with your crush story. Well, it's not really your crush story, but no. But at a very high level to kind of set parents' expectations about college and the idea of college expenses and kind of what mindset people should get in.
Yes. So I chuckle because I think one of the big things for us is widening our aperture and thinking about sources of scholarship or aid very differently. And so back when I was applying to college a long time ago, I was a manager for the baseball team. And I became the manager of the baseball team following my crush. He was a baseball player. And I was like, I can spend more time with him in the dugout. That wasn't a well-laid plan, but I ended up being the manager for the baseball team for 3 years. And because of that, my college guidance counselor in the school said, hey, there is a scholarship available through the Atlanta Falcons for people who have been managers. And I was like, what? And she was like, yes, this is absolutely something you can apply for. So I applied for this scholarship and I won the scholarship. And though it was just a couple $1,000s, it was one of the many scholarships I was able to piece together to help afford attending college. And so I think it's just a great place to remind parents and families that there are sources of funding that are out there that might be weird, it might seem, or connected to some hobby that is really important to think about and take advantage of that. And so often I talk to families who just think think about financing their kids' education in one way. And so I'm hopeful that today we can explore different ways of making your kids' college dreams come true. Oh, and I didn't end up with the crush, by the way. He so didn't pay me any attention.
But I feel like the crush still paid off, like literally.
Yeah.
So it worked out
dividends.
well.
Yeah. So
I think you said that was like a $4,000 scholarship.
it was about
I believe.
$4,000. Yeah.
Which that was, I'm not going to age both of us, but that was 20 years ago, 20 plus years ago,
Yes.
right? Ballpark.
Yes.
And so that's even more money in today's dollars. But I would just say, I don't think any of my high school crushes or boyfriends ever like paid off in a $4,000 way. So,
No.
I mean, it was a successful crush, I think.
I think so too. Hopefully he doesn't send me a bill for it.
And I'm sure you learned something managing the baseball team too.
I did, and it's
Good
actually very
experience.
helpful now when we go to baseball games. I'm like, I got you. I know the technicalities of the game very well.
That's funny. So I appreciate your point about so many parents are kind of thinking about how to finance college, right? They're not necessarily thinking about how to pay less for it. And I do think so much of the talk lately is A, just how expensive college is and how it's been getting more and more expensive. And then to your point, B, about student loans and just how much financing people are having to take on. And I think there are so many other options, and you people like you validate that there are so many other options. And that was one of the things that I remember very vividly from the first time we had that discussion related to this on the volleyball court is you telling me about the discount rate, which we'll talk more about later. And me realizing, I just kind of thought private school was like out of the question for what would be affordable for college without having to take out, ridiculous loans. And so it really opened my eyes up to there's other ways and there's a lot of creative ways to think about this. So I think it would be helpful to start and have you kind of lay out the different types of aid that are out there for college.
Sure. So I'm going to put them into maybe 4 big buckets. And so we'll start with what most people are familiar with, which is federal loans and grants. And so to qualify for these loans and grants, a family or a student will have to fill out their I always get FAFSA mixed up because I use it, but it's free application for federal student aid. And we can talk about the details of that, but that's how you qualify for federal loans and grants, and that would include your Pell Grant. So then the second bucket I will go through is state aid, which would be like in the state of Georgia, we have Hope and Zell Miller. In Florida, there are things like Florida Bright Futures, but that is aid that can be used at either, depending on the state, a public or private institution towards tuition and fees. Then there are institutional scholarships. It's usually merit awards, merit scholarships, or need-based aid. And different institutions will have different criteria and ways to apply for that. And then lastly, we have private scholarships from external agencies. So the story I led with the Atlanta Falcons and the merit scholarship I got from that. So those are the 4 big buckets to think about aid and scholarships and grants to finance a student's education. And my recommendation is you want to maximize as much as you can across all those different buckets, right? And not just focus on one particular type of aid. I talk to parents and families a lot, and I tell them you have to expect to pay something to send your kid to college. The days of going free are extremely rare nowadays. It's, those top 1% or 2% of students, either athletics or, some very, very high awards. So in doing your due diligence and thinking about it, as part of it is families need to be prepared to pay for something. And you get caught off guard if you just come to the school and like, hey, I've been admitted, now what? And so having those conversations early about how are we going to pay for this is extremely important.
And we'll come back to the point about having the conversations early, because I also was shocked by how early you told me I should start certain things, but we'll come back to that.
Yes.
So related to the different types of aid that you just walked through, there are some specific terms and kind of concepts that people need to understand to be able to access this aid, if you will.
Yes.
And I'd love for you to like walk through some of those things. Like there's FAFSA, there's the EFC, SAI. I just hear like all these letters and I'm like, what are all these things? And what do I need to be worried about? And what do I need to be thinking about?
All right. So the alphabet soup of federal loans and grants. So most of those alphabets are tied to, again, the FAFSA, which is the free application for federal student aid. And you fill it out once a year, and it looks at both student and parent assets to determine how much the government thinks a family should pay for college. Or it used to be expected family contribution, or EFC. That was the terminology. It's now changing to the student aid index, or SAI. That change will take place in December of 2023. So let's go back to FAFSA. So let's start with the FAFSA. The FAFSA is the form that you have to fill out in order to qualify for subsidized, unsubsidized grants, Pell eligibility, and even work study. And that form looks at past tax documents, it looks at assets, and it determines through that form and filling out a form, you'll get your EFC, which is expected family contribution. And so that's how much the federal government, based on this formula, thinks that you should pay to go to college. The EFC, which is again affiliated with the FAFSA, is going to change to the student aid index in December of 2023. And the federal government particularly the Department of Education, is redoing the calculations. In some ways, it's supposed to be making the FAFSA easier to fill out. It hasn't opened yet, so those of us who work in college admissions or in financial aid haven't seen it, but that is what the expected outcome is supposed to be.
What does SAI stand for?
It stands for the Student Aid Index, and that is what is replacing EFC, or expected family contribution.
Do you know why they're changing it?
Part of it is, what I've heard, is to be simpler. They're changing the format a little bit, but I don't know all the ins and outs as to why they're changing it.
Okay, a couple FAFSA questions real quick.
Sure.
Is it a complex form to fill out? Like, is it just like you pop down and sit down for 20 minutes, or is it like you need a lot? Is it like doing your taxes?
Well, you need your taxes to complete it. So it can be a little cumbersome, and that is part of the reason why they're changing it, they being the Department of Education. But it is something that you will want to dedicate a couple hours to. And things that you want to have available, again, are last year's tax documents. Depending on assets, it'll ask you a set of questions about that. The good thing about the FAFSA, though, is on each section, they have a little icon of saying, do you need help? Do you need to help understanding these terms? And that is a really useful function. You can look at their FAQs before you start filling it out and get a definition of all the terms and things. So I will say that within the form, they do a really good job of answering questions as you go. And of course, you can save and come back to it later.
Right.
But it's not something that, you can do over with Netflix playing in the background. You definitely want to focus.
Okay, another FAFSA question.
Sure.
Do you, being at a private school as an example, does your university leverage FAFSA data even for different aid that you would administer, or merit awards?
So, yeah. Every institution that you submit your FAFSA form to, and there's a code. So each university has a code, and you can say, I want you to send my FAFSA to each school. So yes, private and public institutions use it. And the reason that matters is because what a family is expected to contribute depends on the cost of attendance at the institution. So it won't be one number for every institution. And so that's why if you send it to different institutions, you might get a different EFC, or expected family contribution for that. So that's why it's important to send it. There are a lot of families who choose not to fill out a FAFSA because they know that they won't qualify, or don't think they'll qualify for any subsidized or unsubsidized loans. So they skip the process. And that is a decision families can make. However, filling it out and knowing what you might qualify for is, I think, important to just understanding the financial landscape, right? And you do not have to accept a loan that is offered to you. right, at an institution. It just says this is what you would be eligible for, but you can decline it. And so that I think is helpful in financial planning and understanding the ways in which to finance an education.
Could I fill out the FAFSA early, like now, just to see what I would get, or will it not even let me until I have a kid of a certain age?
I'm assuming you could, but no one's ever asked me that question before.
I was more just curious, like, could I do it now just to see what it tells me?
So here's the thing about filling it out early. It changes every year. So I don't know how realistic of a picture it would give you now if you have, 4 or 5 years until your kid goes to college.
Okay.
The other thing is that the formulas change slightly based on the number of kids you have currently enrolled in undergraduate and graduate education. So I think it's more of in that time, it would be a more accurate picture. A lot of institutions on their websites, though, colleges and universities in their Office of Financial Aid pages will have a calculator. So you can kind of plug in some numbers to get a rough estimate. So that might be a less cumbersome way to figure out what it might cost to attend that particular institution. And you don't need all the financial documents and all that other stuff that you need for the FAFSA.
Okay, interesting. Can you talk a little bit about this discount rate concept and just what it means? Because that was one of the things when we talked that I was fascinated by.
Yes. So the discount rate is the total institutional grant aid awarded to undergraduates as a percentage of the gross tuition and fee revenue the institution would collect if all students paid the full tuition. So to break that down it's actually the difference between the sticker price and what families usually pay at the end of the day to go to an institution. So in 2022, 2023, the average discount rate was about 56% for private institutions. So that means that students attending nationally, private colleges and universities paid about 56% of what the cost of attendance was listed. And it's expected to continue to go up over the next 2 or 3 years.
Which I think is a crazy percentage, crazy good to be clear, because again, there's so much sticker shock when and everyone talks about, the price of college going up and all that. And when you look at the cost of certain private institutions, which is why I kind of thought, like, if I had to guess, my kids won't go to private school because it's just ridiculously expensive. But when you take something where you see that it, on paper, the sticker price is $50,000 a year, and then you realize, but most people on average are paying $25,000 a year. You're like, oh, well, that's a little bit more reasonable.
Yeah.
Right. And then again, that's after all of that discount rate includes all of the different merit and right. Does it?
So your discount rate, it will include some institutional merit aid, right? But like if it's athletic scholarship or something like that, that's separate because some of it you can stack. But let's say that is the $25,000 that you would be paying after all the institutional awards are given to you. Now that's when you start layering on your federal loans and grants, your state aid and private scholarships. And that's how you get that number down even more.
Got it.
The important thing to think about the discount rate, it usually just applies to the tuition. So whatever your tuition balance is. So if it's $50,000 for tuition, the discount rate usually drops that. It doesn't include living on campus, meal plans, and all that other stuff that are expenses that come with college. So the discount rate won't impact that, but you could use your federal loans and grants, state aid in some instances, and your external scholarships to cover those other expenses. So that's why I say it's good to maximize across all of those different categories, those 4 big buckets, to reduce your overall cost of attendance.
Okay. Rebecca, one of the things that I thought was interesting that I did not know up until recently, and it's kind of related to the FIRE community, which not everybody that listens to this podcast is focused on FIRE or financial independence, retire early, but some are. And I just assumed that maybe one of the fringe benefits of being retired early would be that I have a lower income and I might be eligible for more aid. But kudos to the government, who is very on top of things and is looking at your overall assets, which totally makes sense. No, it's a great system, but I just didn't think that was how it works. Right. And so I do think it's fascinating and just worth pointing out that for all of the aid we're talking about, they are looking at your total assets, not just your current salary. And they look at how much is in your 529 plan. Interestingly, they don't look at how much is in a family member's 529 plan. So if you have a 529 plan that your grandparents have, my understanding that the child's grandparents have, my understanding is that that actually is not an asset they look at for your EFC or SAI.
Yeah.
So there's some interesting kind of nuances like that. But I think it would be helpful to talk a little bit more about some of the federal aid that you were mentioning earlier. And you had said there's some maxes on it.
Mm-hmm. So I think this is also where it could trip up families and students as they are applying. So there is, after you fill out your EFC or your FAFSA and complete the form, there is a max amount of subsidized or unsubsidized loans you could be eligible for, and it's on a sliding scale. So your first year, the max a dependent student can receive in federal aid is around $5,500. Only $3,500 of that could be subsidized. And then when you go to...
What is the subsidized versus unsubsidized?
So the subsidized versus unsubsidized means that if it's subsidized, that means that you're not incurring interest on the loan, versus unsubsidized, you are incurring interest. And so they put a cap amount, they being, again, the federal government, on the amount of subsidized loans that an individual could receive on top of a cap on the unsubsidized loans. So it's like around $5,500 for your freshman year. And of course, this changes annually. And then your sophomore year, your second year, you get, I think the max you can receive in unsubsidized loans is around $7,500. Again, about $3,500 of that can only be in subsidized if you qualify for both. And then for your junior year on, it goes up to $9,500 a year for a total aggregate that you can receive in loans for undergraduate education being $31,500. So that is the max now that you can receive in unsubsidized or subsidized loans for undergraduate education.
From the federal government?
From the federal government.
So you can go outside and privately get student loans at like an unlimited amount.
You can.
I believe. Well, as much as someone's willing to give you.
Yes. And that does depend. That max amount goes up slightly if you're looking at an independent versus a dependent student. So a dependent student is someone who is under 24, whose parents apply for a direct plus loan or a parent plus loan. So they are eligible for less if they are a dependent student. If they qualify as an independent student, then they do qualify for more loans, but it's still capped.
Got it. Yeah, it's interesting. So everyone you hear about who has like hundreds of thousands of dollars in student loans, those aren't through the federal government.
Right.
Or a small portion of them might be.
A small portion of it might be, and then that cap amount starts over if you are a graduate student. And graduate students are automatically considered independent students. And so then you're on a different scale. So if you're going to graduate school, business school, medical school, and for medical students, they can take out a little bit more because it's more expensive education. So it is possible that you could have $100,000 in loans from the federal government, but it's most likely from undergraduate and graduate education combined. For those who have that astronomical amount for undergraduate, they've then brought in some private loans.
Okay. And I assume you would want to prioritize federal loans first because there's a lot of benefits.
I would say so. It's a fixed rate. So whatever the rate is when you take out the loan, it's fixed for the life of the loans. And I think right now it's about 5.5%. So it's usually fairly reasonable versus when you start looking at private loans that they're not fixed or they have all different types of terms. And again, there are a lot of people who are planning their financial approach to college that don't want to take out loans and grants. And it's an important thing to keep in mind. I think it is helpful to at least see what you qualify for, because even if you don't want to take out the entire amount of the loan, you can say how much you want. You might qualify for some subsidized loans that might be helpful. So I think it is an approach to consider, but there is plenty of families who don't want to take out loans. And if that's the case, then I do think you need to, look at institutional aid, state aid, private scholarships, and then layer that on actually what the cost of attendance is, right? And then start doing the math that way.
Okay, Rebecca, I just have like so many questions. I'm trying to stack them in a logical order, if you will. So first, I want to just give like a really quick shout out to a super cool program that the current university you work for, Oglethorpe University, has called the Flagship 50 program.
Yes.
When you first mentioned this, I assumed it was some sort of a larger program that you all were members of. And then I realized you created, well, I don't know about you personally, but your university created it.
Yes.
It's brilliant. I was telling Greg about it and he was like, no. And I was like, yes, that's a real program.
It is a real program.
And then he said we should take the kids on a tour of Oglethorpe.
Well, come on. We offer tours Tuesday through Friday, 10 a.m. and 2 p.m.
That's probably the goal of the program, is it makes people rethink private institutions.
Yes, that is been a signature scholarship program for Oglethorpe for, I want to say, about a decade. And there are a few other institutions that have their version of it.
So tell us what it is.
So for Flagship 50, it is this: we commit to students who meet certain criteria that the tuition that you pay for Oglethorpe education will not be higher or will be the same as the tuition and fees at the state's flagship institution. So for Georgia, it is the same as the tuition and fees for the University of Georgia, for Alabama, for the University of Alabama, and we do it for all 50 states. And so what that means is all the merit aid that we give you, so the institutional aid that we give you, will stack up such that what you're left paying out of pocket in terms of tuition would be in line with what that flagship state institution would be.
And when you say for those who are eligible,
Yes.
like, is there a bunch of fine print on there, or is it pretty much like anybody? Or
It's,
you know?
I mean, it's pretty straightforward. So it's for you either. There's 3 ways you can qualify for Flagship 50. Have a total GPA of 3.8 or higher as recalculated by Oglethorpe. Have a 30 composite on your ACT or a 1400 super score on your SAT. So if you meet any one of those criteria, then you automatically qualify for Flagship 50 at
so you
Oglethorpe.
gotta have pretty solid grades.
Yes.
But doable, right?
Solid grades, or you can, maybe your grades, you really challenged yourself in your curriculum, but that's why we have the test scores as another way to qualify for Flagship 50.
I think I would have made it in on my GPA, but not my SAT score. So it's nice that you have options, right?
You have options. And what we value at Oglethorpe is, there's students learn and shine in different ways. And so it's important to help students demonstrate that. And some people are taking the most rigorous curriculum or balancing 15 sports and home responsibilities. And so the GPA is just not a 3.8, and that's fine. But they can really buckle down and study and show up for a test. And so I think that is why we have those different ways to qualify for it.
Yeah. So, and just to like put in perspective how that changes the cost of college for a family, I think you'd be best to verify this, but Oglethorpe's sticker price is about $48,000.
$46,700 and some change, but yeah.
Okay, there we go. Okay, so 45 plus
Yes.
upwards. And if I qualified for that, the average tuition right now, and this is posted on your Flagship 50 website, is for the University of Georgia is $12,080. So I would go from paying $46,000 to $12,000
Yes.
tuition for my child. If I was coming from Wyoming, the average price is $7,072. I could send my child to the beautiful city of Atlanta, Georgia, and pay $7,072.
That's correct.
That is pretty awesome. So kudos to you all for having a program like that. And it sounds like you said there are other universities that also have something like that. Not all, but some.
There are. And so that's why I say, as a part of getting prepared for college, it's important to do your due diligence and to think broadly about the type of institution that might fit for you. And sometimes people rule out college or university simply because of the perception of the tuition and fees. And when you start doing your due diligence and looking at these different scholarship programs or the different scholarships that you might apply for or qualify for, then it's like, oh, this could become a reality for me, particularly if I'm stacking all these different types of aid.
Yeah. So on that note, let's talk about some of the kind of what I'd call division of labor of like what parents need to do versus what students need to be focused on.
Right.
Because I think they're like, to your point, it's not all on the parents. Like there's stuff that both people need to be doing.
Yes. So we were having this conversation about one of your kids saying that they want to go to the University of Hawaii.
It's because she wants to go to Hawaii, to be clear. But yes, who doesn't?
If you like it, I love it. And the reason I say that is we shouldn't, I want to encourage parents and families when you're doing your due diligence. So let the kid dream big, and they can start researching, what's the cost of attendance to go there? What is the average GPA of someone who's been admitted? What are the different types of scholarship packages? In addition to what are the majors and things that I'm interested in? Because when you're talking 8th grade, 9th grade, if we want to encourage college as the next step, dream really big. But those are the types of things that they can start researching and saying, okay, if I know that it costs this to attend, and that includes tuition, room and board, these are the majors, these are the types of scholarships that are available at the institution, then we can come back as a family and say, okay, now how might we map this out? And that's a lot of due diligence, but there are things that the kids can do, and then there's things that the parents can do in terms of saying, okay, well, what are the investments that we've put aside to fund college? What does it mean to have a kid that goes out of state? Because that layers on the travel costs of them coming back and forth for the holidays. And then come up with a roadmap of what makes sense for both of you all for a particular institution. And so if you're starting 8th and 9th grade with this kind of due diligence in dividing the task, I think it helps the conversations be more authentic and honest. And you're not just crossing off a school because of perceived cost. And you can come up with a plan on, if this is what you really want to do, then we can figure out a way to finance this. Or maybe we can't, but we've talked about it up front, and we're not getting to, now it's your senior year and your heart is set on a place. And now I have to let you down when everything else is so high stakes about maybe this isn't the right path.
Well, yeah, I love that example of letting your kids have some kind of skin in the game, but some responsibility to like go research it and figure it out. Because using that flagship 50 program as an example, you might find that a school your kid is interested in has a program like that. And then you realize, okay, the requirement is a 3.8 GPA or this score on your SAT or ACT. And so then that puts the onus on them to say, look, you might have a family discussion and say, okay, if that really is where you want to go, I will help you pay for that if you meet this qualification, because that will heavily discount, the price of that school and make it much more affordable. And so I just love the idea of just getting kids involved. And then let's talk about like test prep. Okay. Because you opened my eyes up to the importance and investment of test prep, which I didn't really do when I was a kid. I mean, I remember I had like a book that my parents bought me, and I would study that book, and that was about it. But I didn't like, I don't think it was like I don't think I even asked, but I don't think it was like an affordable option to go take classes. I knew they existed, but I didn't do it.
Yeah, that was the same with the book, maybe, or, maybe I took a week before I went in and took the thing. So,
actually, the book had a CD-ROM attached, and it had a program I could put in my computer. I remember that now. But go ahead.
We keep dating ourselves. So test prep, I think it is before your kid shows up for their SAT or ACT. Test prep is just getting them used and comfortable to the format. And there's different ways to do it. You can do it low stakes, get a book. Both the College Board that does SAT and AP exams and the separate institution that does the ACT both have books that you can go buy. The other thing is you can go onto their website, and they have free practice exams, and they're adaptive, just like a student would experience on the test. So it's just getting comfortable to seeing the material, thinking about the timing. So that is, if you don't have a lot of money to invest in test prep, there are low cost, no cost ways to at least get your kid familiar with it. But then there are testing agencies. Some agencies will do week-long boot camps. Some will do 6 weeks. And I think that's worth exploring what fits in with your financial planning. But I will say this, again, if let's say you make a $500 investment in test prep, but your kid then qualifies for the top merit award at the institution of their dreams, that to me is a significant ROI. But that varies for each family, but it is worth exploring. And I will say this, it's something that you want to start earlier than later. So around 9th or 10th grade, you want to start looking into test prep. You should plan to take your standardized test the summer of your junior year going into your senior year. So you want to do your test prep before that. And the reason you want to do it in your junior year or the summer of your junior year is because when you start your senior year, the fall of your senior year is when you're doing all the college essays. So you want to have all your tests and everything out the way, or know in enough time that you might need to retake it so you can plan accordingly before the November, December, or January due dates for applications.
Okay. Yeah, I was surprised by how early I need to start thinking about test prep, right?
Yes.
So we've got a ninth grader, and I was like, okay, we got to start looking into our test prep options. But I also I think your point about ROI is great, because there is just a ton of research and support for test prep. It's not necessarily going to make you better at math overnight or language arts, but it teaches you how to take the test properly. And that's half the battle on the SAT, how you time yourself, how you,
yes,
just sort of plan it out. And so I definitely, I think the point about the ROI is important, of if you think about what your child may be eligible for as a result of a strong enough score, it could really be worth the time on the test prep.
Well, and if you plan too, if you need to take the test again, you give your kid enough time to pivot, right? Like if you're cramming everything into their senior year, the fall of their senior year, when the bulk of college applications are, then you want to layer on maybe one or two tests on top of that. It becomes additional stress that we don't necessarily need to have if we plan out. So if we think about this over a 2 or 3 year clip in terms of applying for college versus everything happening your senior year.
Okay, so back to private schools. If I come to, and maybe Oglethorpe's not the best example because you've got the Flagship 50 program, but just in general, if I go and apply if my child goes and applies to a private school, and I guess this could apply for public schools too, but how are you deciding what I'm going to pay, right? Mm-hmm. What merit I get? Are you using the FAFSA? It's a combination of my, GPA, SAT, what sports I play, if I play the harp, all those sorts of things.
I have a funny story about a harp player, but I'll save it for later. But so it varies from institution to institution, but typically if you are qualifying for merit aid, it is going to be based on some combination of your academic achievements. So GPA, test scores, it could be based on extracurriculars. So again, if you're an athlete, and athletic scholarships are only available at Division I and Division II schools, just keep that in mind. So everybody pays something different because everyone's merit is different. And FAFSA then comes into place if there's a need-based component, and if the school does some kind of need-based aid. And there are some institutions that match total need. So if the cost of attendance minus your expected family income leaves you with a balance of, let's say, $15,000, there are some private institutions who will cover that gap. So you're really only responsible for your expected family contributions.
Okay.
So again, that makes the cost of going to those institutions much more affordable, but those tend to be the most highly selective institutions. So that goes back to the importance of test prep or distinguishing yourself. Mm-hmm. But that's how merit aid and what ultimately becomes a discount rate plays out. It varies greatly from student to student.
So I'll apply. You'll come back as the university and tell me what you're going to charge me, or really more like what merit I'm getting, and then what the math is.
Yes.
Is that negotiable at that point? Or is it like, oh, that's my amount, I can now decide if I want to go there or not?
I say if there's something that changes in your family circumstances, then that's when it becomes negotiable. Like, it is what it is based on our calculations and formula. But if you retake a test, or there's a change in your family circumstances, so you're dependent and now both parents were employed when you originally filled out the FAFSA and now they're not, those are all great reasons, I think, to come back and say, hey, can you look at this differently? There are some parents, and there are some independent admissions counselors who advise families to go back and haggle and say, this school over here gave me $5 more. Can you match it or do better? And I think that's an independent call. And at some point I go back to my earlier statement, you should expect to pay something. And if we think of colleges and universities as a business, there is some level of revenue that's needed for us to be able to provide the college education and experience your
get what you pay for
kid wants. So I think that's but every family has to weigh that for themselves. But there are some who haggle, and it really just depends on the institution. But I think you're in a better position to come back and say, hey, I have additional information in my application that might make me more competitive for some additional aid.
Okay. Interesting. Okay. Is it true that some schools are more merit generous than others?
Merit generous meaning?
I had heard that they're, and perhaps that's the discount rate.
So so we call it merit awards, scholarships, but it's institutional aid. So if I'm using any of my operating budget or any of my endowment to give out as scholarships, that translates to the discount rate. And there are institutions that have more money to give because of larger endowments, or they pay more.
Right. Isn't like Harvard have like the highest and some massive? Like...
Yes. Yes. And so it's institutions like Harvard or Pomona College in California that do meet total need. So because they, again, have the resources to do that, which is great. It aligns with their mission of providing access, which all colleges should focus on providing access. But each college is different, and that's why it's important to do that due diligence up front. But if a college or university meets total need, that will be very clear on their web pages. And so when your kid is doing their research, that's an important point to note.
Okay, so speaking of research, are there any specific resources or tools that you think are particularly helpful for parents and students, or should they just be kind of going out there and starting to Google things? And
Oh, Dr. Google. So I will say this, when you're looking for external scholarships, so that come from community-based organizations or private-based organizations, two trusted places to go would one be the high school college counselor at your kid's school. They typically get inundated with potential scholarship opportunities, and depending on their caseload, just might not be able to tell everyone. So if you're proactive in reaching out to them, that's a good resource. Your public library and your public librarians tend to have a list of resources. Sometimes community organizations will drop off flyers, and so that's how you can learn about scholarships that are available. I also say if you are involved in a community organization or church or synagogue or place of worship, oftentimes they too will offer scholarships and processes. So asking around in your circles, in the organizations you're involved in, are ways to figure out about private scholarships and external agencies. And then particularly your high school counselor or public librarian might tell you some trusted websites that you want to go to. I will say this, in applying for private scholarships, I think about it as a parallel track to applying to college, because there's usually like a resume involved or an essay or two, and the kid can repurpose it. So I'm writing this essay for my college application. I might be able to switch a few things and make it apply for private scholarship applications.
Rebecca, when we were talking in advance of this episode, you said something that I thought was just incredible. Well, you said a lot of things, to be clear, that were helpful, but related to what you were just saying, you said, put the same amount of energy that you're putting into applying for colleges into applying for external scholarships.
Yes.
Right. And that could, to your point about like the ROI of your, baseball management role, or baseball team manager, you could get a lot out of that. And the other thing that I thought was interesting is there's not one resource, right? There's not like one website where every college private scholarship has to go and register or something. There's some bigger well-known sites like FastWeb and things like that, but there isn't one. So it really does behoove you to spend some time. I think some of the resources you gave were great, but then also to just like Google stuff and, like if your kid really, and then I want to hear your harp story, but if your kid plays the harp, Google like harp college scholarships and see what you find, right?
I mean, that's the story in a nutshell. There was an institution that I was working for who they needed a harpist for their chamber orchestra. And it took them 3 years to be able to finally award, and it was a full tuition award to a harpist. I mean, now you got to pay a lot of money to have a whole harp in your house. But I mean, there are ways in which being involved in unique opportunities opportunities or unique co-curriculars could pay off. That's not an approach for everyone, but it is something to keep into consideration. So if your kid does have a really unique interest, maybe help them explore it, because it could at some college or university result in a scholarship, or it could result in an external scholarship.
Yeah. Okay. What other tips have we not, tips or kind of thoughts and advice have we not yet covered that you think would be helpful for people?
Okay, so some of the other tips to think about when trying to amass as much scholarship and aid as possible is, one, there's more money when you're coming into an institution. So thinking about your senior year going into your freshman year, there are a lot more external scholarships. Typically institutions, when they will give you a merit award, it's when you come in, and you won't be able to renegotiate it. So it's worth putting in the effort early and coming in with those monies. One thing about external grants that I like to say, or external scholarships, is those go with you. So you might be considering 5 colleges or universities. Your external grants will go to all 5 of those colleges and universities. So again, in thinking about how to spend time, it's a worthwhile effort, in addition to trying to maximize what you get from the college or university in and of itself. Which brings me to point number 2. When you're looking at colleges and universities, we're very clear about the average GPA, the average test scores, the recommended curriculum. And so if you're applying to an institution, you want to be considerate of kind of, you fit within those constraints that they've said, this is what a typical student looks like, because if you are there or above, that will make you more competitive for those institutional awards. If you are a little bit below that, or a lot a bit below that you could definitely be admitted. You just won't be as competitive for those scholarships and awards. So that's
you're more likely to pay full price.
Right.
Or
pay something.
Price.
But it's just like, if we're saying this is kind of who we're looking for, be within that range. Now, if that's your dream school and you're a little bit below that range, then that's a conversation again to have with the families up front, because you can plan and pivot around that. I think it's important too, when you are planning out your finances, plan for things that aren't associated with just tuition, room, and board. So for instance, college tours are very important. So again, if we're going to Hawaii for a college tour, you need to plan for that in the senior year. Application fees, that's a thing that people don't take into consideration, and they're not always waived. So the test, taking the actual SAT and ACT are all expenses of applying to college that sometimes people don't plan for. And then once you get to college, there are all the things that are not associated again with tuition, room, and boards. So internships, and making sure you have enough suits to do all the interviews for internships. Or if someone wants to do study abroad, sometimes the tuition is covered for study abroad, but maybe not the room and board. Or it's, they want to go to a football game and have the life. So all of those are expenses that come with going to college that a proactive family can plan for, and thinking about the long-term financial commitments.
Yeah, that's, I think those are really great points. Another thing that I didn't realize was an option that, again, we're going to talk about Georgia for a minute, just because that's the state we both live in. But I gather some other states have similar scholarships like this and similar policies. But that, like, when you get the Zell or Hope Scholarship in the state of Georgia, which is Georgia Lottery funded, FYI, they actually will. I always thought you had to go to a state school, like that only works with the state schools, but it turns out you actually can, if you qualify for that, you can apply that amount of money towards a private school.
Well, it changes. So for Zell, the Zell Miller Scholarship or the Hope Scholarship, you can use those scholarships at private institutions. The amount is less. So, okay. But yes, it does apply. And those are up on the website, so you can see what the differences are. And that's GeorgiaFutures.org. That's the website for Zell and Hope in the state of Georgia.
And I thought the Georgia Futures, which is gafutures.org, we'll put a link in the show notes. I thought that's an interesting website because it's full of a ton of great information for the state of Georgia. But I would imagine other states also have a similar website. And so I would look for those resources in your specific states. And again, I think one of the best pieces of advice I've heard, which I think is a lot going to fall more on the parents than the students, realistically, realistically is for all the energy my students are putting into applying for colleges, I'm going to feel like I'm going to need to put in an equal amount of energy to go deep and research scholarships and aid and everything that is out there that is potentially available. And I hope that there will be a strong ROI on my time spent on that.
I think so. Well, another thing to think about for students in how to finance it is working on campus. So once they get to college, there are things like being a resident assistant or doing work study or other things that can offset the cost, kind of those daily expenses. And particularly if you work on campus, even if it's not through work study, those jobs tend to be flexible with your academic schedule. So you can still be a student. And so there are a number of students, and today's student is changing so much that they do have more and more students are expecting to have some responsibility for paying some of their tuition and fees. And I think that does help keep skin in the game, right? That you have to pay, and you don't want to be here for 6-7 years if you don't have to paying for this and incurring that interest.
That is a great point.
I think if I could close it, I would say that investing in college is, to me, a smart investment. There's plenty of research that shows that someone with a bachelor's degree earns $1 million more over the course of their lifetime career than someone who doesn't have a college degree. So setting our kids up for success, maybe setting them up to take care of us when we get older, investing in a college degree is still very important. And if you start early and think about some of the strategies that we've discussed, there is a path forward to make college affordable for whatever type of student and whatever type of financial plan you have in place.
Okay. Yeah, I love that. I know my discussions with you have opened up my horizon. I was already a big believer in the value of college, regardless of all of the thoughts about, like, do you really need college to be successful? Like, I think we do still live in a world where it is heavily required for many jobs, respected and appreciated. And it just kind of gets your foot in the door for many types of things, depending on what you want to do. So I've always been a big believer in it, but I also had kind of a limited view of what I thought was affordable for college. And I thank you for opening up my eyes to a much broader, wider view of what could be available for my own children, and I hope for the children of everybody listening today. So thank you so much for joining us, Rebecca. I think this is incredibly helpful, and we appreciate your time.
Thank you for having me. Always happy to talk and help students and families.
Yeah, you're awesome. And like you said, Oglethorpe is given tours Tuesday through Thursday?
Tuesday through Friday.
Oh, Tuesday through Friday.
10 a.m. and 2 p.m. So I look forward to seeing you all there. And you might even get me as your tour guide.
Oh, nice. Can you bring younger kids? Like,
yes.
Can I bring a 7th grader and a...
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, we partner with, so again, when you start talking about pipeline and building affinity, we definitely have younger kids come. The pitch isn't as strong, and if you come during the summer, run around on the baseball field and just say you were at this pretty campus that looks like Hogwarts. So bring them, we'll take them all.
Yeah, we should give a shout out that the Oglethorpe campus does look like Hogwarts.
It really does
look beautiful.
Like...
Yeah. No, it's an interesting point because I have actually experienced this in terms of getting kids excited about college, in that we were at a Georgia State game, which is now in like the campus, and there's a stadium now, and it's kind of in the downtown Atlanta area. It's in the old Atlanta Braves stadium. And the kids, when we went to the game, we were kind of going through campus. And I think the kids were like, oh, this is really cool. And the experience of like being at something college related, even our youngest kids, it got them excited about the concept of college. And so I do think even just for fun at like some local universities, taking your kids on a college tour, especially if they're not as academically interested or inclined, like it might get them more excited about, seeing what a college campus looks like and getting a feel for it, and thinking about the independence of being off at college and still being in school could be fun for them.
Yeah, we do that I do that with my daughter every summer. I surprise her with a end of the year trip, and wherever city we go to, we visit 1 or 2 colleges. Some of them well known, some of them not, just again to help widen her perspective on, oh, this could be a good college for me, or oh, I really like this city or this place. So
yeah.
building it into your already planned family vacations is really easy. And you can do an unofficial or official tour, but tours are free. So that's just another way to think about college and building that affinity for it.
Yeah, that's awesome. Great tip. I love that you do that. Okay. Thank you all for listening. I know your time is limited and valuable. We appreciate you spending some of it with us today. If you've enjoyed this episode, we love it if you leave us a written review on Apple Podcast or a rating on Spotify. I really appreciate it. We also encourage you to share this episode with a friend or family member to encourage ongoing discussions about money and specifically about college. So send it to some of your other parent friends that also have, kids of college age, and hopefully it's a helpful discussion and they'll learn something new. You can also subscribe wherever you listen to podcasts. If you have any thoughts or questions, we always love to hear from you, and you can leave a voicemail or text us at 404-981-3370, or you can hit us up on Instagram. Thank you so much. Thank you, Dr. Rebecca Sandidge, for joining us today.
Thanks so much.
Thanks.
We going